I've agreed to give my kidney to save my son Marcus, but something doesn't add up. He's supposedly dying, yet yesterday I saw him lifting heavy boxes at a warehouse across town. When I confronted his wife Jasmine about it, she had an explanation for everything. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Now I'm standing outside that same warehouse at midnight, and what I'm seeing through the windows is making me question everything I thought I knew about the people I call family. The cold October wind cuts through my jacket as I peer through the grimy warehouse window. Inside, under harsh fluorescent lights, I can see Marcus, my supposedly dying son, directing other men as they move what looks like medical equipment. There's no weakness in his movements, no signs of the kidney failure that's supposed to be killing him. He looks strong, healthy, and very much alive. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is the woman standing next to him, clipboard in hand, checking items off a list. It's Jasmine, my daughter-in-law, the woman who's been crying on my shoulder for months about Marcus's deteriorating condition, the woman who convinced me to save his life with my kidney, the woman who convinced me to mortgage my house and drain my life savings for his medical treatment. They're both laughing about something in a warehouse full of medical equipment at midnight, while I'm supposed to be preparing for surgery to give Marcus my kidney in 3 days. My name is Ruby Johnson, and I'm 68 years old. I live in a modest 3-bedroom house on Chicago's South Side, in the same neighborhood where I raised my son Marcus after his father walked out on us when Marcus was just 7 years old. That house represents 43 years of sacrifice, 43 years of working double shifts as a nurse's aide to make sure Marcus had everything he needed. After my husband James died of a heart attack 3 years ago, Marcus and Jasmine became my world. They were all I had left, and I thought they felt the same way about me. I thought we were a family. I thought they loved me. How naive I was. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. 6 months ago, on a sweltering Tuesday evening in July. I remember the date exactly, July 15th, because it was the anniversary of James's first heart attack. I always spend that day tending to my garden, talking to James like he's still with me, keeping my hands busy so my mind doesn't wander to dark places. I was in my backyard watering the tomato plants James had helped me plant the spring before he died. The evening air was thick with humidity, and the cicadas were making their summer symphony. It should have been peaceful, but there was something off about the evening, a tension I couldn't quite place. That's when Marcus showed up. He came through the back gate. He always had a key to my house. And the first thing I noticed was how terrible he looked. His dark skin had an ashen quality, like someone had dusted it with gray powder. His eyes, normally bright and full of mischief, were sunken and rimmed with purple circles. He'd lost a lot of weight, too. A lot of weight. His clothes hung on him like they belonged to a bigger man.
"Hey, Mama," he said, settling heavily onto the porch steps. His voice was different, too, weak, raspier than usual. "Marcus, baby, you look awful. Are you feeling all right?" He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just tired, Mama. You know how construction work is. We're putting up this new office building downtown, and they've got us pulling 12-hour shifts." I set down my watering can and really looked at my son. Marcus had been working construction since he was 20, and while the work was hard, he'd always thrived on it. He was proud of his strength, proud of being able to build things with his hands. But the man sitting on my porch steps looked like he could barely lift a hammer. "When's the last time you saw a doctor?" I asked. "Mama, you know I don't like doctors. I'm fine. Just need to catch up on some sleep." That was classic Marcus, stubborn and proud just like his father had been. But something in my mother's instincts was screaming that this wasn't just fatigue. This was something more serious. Over the next few weeks, I watched Marcus deteriorate before my eyes. Every time he visited, which became less frequent, he looked worse. He moved slower. He ate less. He spent more time in the bathroom. I started keeping a mental catalog of symptoms, drawing on my 30 years of experience in healthcare. Jasmine, meanwhile, became more attentive to me than she had ever been. She was always polite enough, but there had always been a distance between us. She was from a different generation, more focused on her career at the beauty salon than on family relationships. But during those weeks when Marcus was declining, she became almost doting. "Ruby," she said one Sunday afternoon in early August, "I'm so glad Marcus has you in his life. You notice things. You care about his health in a way that," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "in a way that I sometimes miss because I'm too close to the situation." I remember feeling pleased by her words. After 3 years of marriage to my son, Jasmine was finally acknowledging my importance in Marcus's life. She was recognizing that a mother's love came with a kind of intuitive understanding that couldn't be replicated. How perfectly she played me. It was August 20th when she delivered the devastating news. Marcus was in the bathroom. He'd been spending increasing amounts of time there when Jasmine pulled me aside in my own kitchen. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her hands shook as she reached for mine.
"Ruby," she whispered, glancing toward the bathroom door, "I can't keep this secret anymore. I'm scared, and I don't know what to do." My heart immediately started racing. "What secret, baby? What's wrong?" "It's Marcus. He's really sick, Ruby. Sicker than he's letting on. He made me promise not to tell you because he didn't want you to worry, but I can't watch him suffer like this anymore." The words hit me like ice water in my veins. "What do you mean, sick? What kind of sick?" Jasmine glanced again toward the bathroom, then leaned closer. "His kidneys are failing. He's been hiding it for months, but it's getting worse. Last night," she paused, her voice breaking. "Last night, he collapsed in our bathroom. There was blood in his urine, Ruby. So much blood." I felt the room spinning around me. My strong, stubborn son, the boy who used to race his bicycle down the steepest hills in the neighborhood, who joined the high school football team despite being smaller than the other players, who worked construction because he loved the physical challenge, was dying. "How do you know it's his kidneys?" I managed to ask. "He finally went to see a doctor 3 weeks ago, Dr. Williams at Northwestern Memorial. The doctor said it's hereditary, something that runs in families. He said Marcus might have gotten it from his father's side." That detail hit me particularly hard. David, Marcus's father, had walked on us when Marcus was 7. I'd never known much about David's family medical history. For all I knew, there could have been kidney disease running through his bloodline. "What did the doctor say about treatment?" "That's the thing, Ruby. Marcus needs dialysis immediately, and eventually he'll need a kidney transplant. But he's refusing treatment. He says he doesn't want to be a burden on anyone, especially you. He says he'd rather just let nature take its course." The thought of my son giving up, of choosing to die rather than fight, filled me with a desperate panic I'd never experienced before, not even when James had his heart attack. "There has to be something we can do. What about the transplant? How do we find a donor?" Jasmine looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read at the time. Looking back now, I realize it was calculation masked as hope. "Well, the doctor said family members are usually the best matches, especially mothers. Your blood type, your tissue markers, they'd be more likely to be compatible than anyone else. Then we need to get me tested immediately."
"Ruby, you can't let Marcus know I told you any of this. He'd be furious with me. We need to find a way to get him to the doctor without him knowing you know." The next few days were a carefully orchestrated dance of deception. I had to pretend I didn't know my son was dying while I watched him deteriorate before my eyes. I had to act surprised when Jasmine suggested that Marcus see a doctor. I had to feign ignorance when Marcus finally admitted he'd been feeling unwell. But the hardest part was pretending I didn't notice the inconsistencies that were already starting to pile up. For instance, Marcus claimed he was too weak to help me move a bookshelf in my living room, but I saw him lifting heavy bags of cement mix at the hardware store that same afternoon. He said the medication made him nauseous and he couldn't eat, but Jasmine mentioned he finished a large pizza by himself the night before. I told myself I was overthinking things. When you're worried about someone you love, you look for problems everywhere. Maybe he was having good days and bad days. Maybe the medication affected him differently at different times. 3 weeks after Jasmine's revelation, Jasmine arranged for Marcus and me to meet with Dr. Williams at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Northwestern Memorial is an imposing building on Chicago's near north side, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky like a monument to modern medicine. As we walked through the lobby, I was struck by the smell, that particular hospital combination of disinfectant, floor polish, and something undefinable that always reminded me of fear and hope existing in the same space. Dr. Williams' office was on the 8th floor in the nephrology wing. The walls were lined with medical degrees and awards, and there was a large anatomical model of a kidney on his desk. He was a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look both intelligent and trustworthy. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, shaking my hand with just the right amount of firmness, "I'm glad we're finally meeting. Marcus has told me so much about you." Marcus sat in the chair next to me, looking appropriately ill and worried. Jasmine stood behind his chair, her hand resting supportively on his shoulder. "Doctor," I said, "please tell me honestly, how bad is my son's condition?" Dr. Williams consulted a thick folder on his desk. "I'm afraid it's quite serious. End-stage renal failure. Without intervention, Marcus has perhaps 6 months to live." The words hit me like a physical blow. 6 months! My son had 6 months to live. "But there's hope," Dr. Williams continued. "With immediate dialysis and eventually a kidney transplant, Marcus can live a normal, healthy life." "What do we need to do immediately?"
Well, first we need to get Marcus started on dialysis 3 times a week. That will help stabilize his condition while we work on finding a kidney donor. "I want to be tested as a donor," I said without hesitation. Dr. Williams smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. Mothers are often the best matches for their children. We'll need to run a complete battery of tests on you: blood work, tissue typing, general health assessment." "How much will all of this cost?" I asked, because I had to know. Dr. Williams exchanged a glance with Jasmine. "The dialysis will be covered by Marcus's insurance through his construction job, but the transplant surgery itself, I'm afraid that's where it gets expensive. The total cost, including your surgery as the donor, post-operative care, and anti-rejection medications, will be approximately $300,000. $300,000. The number was so large, it didn't seem real. "How much of that will insurance cover?" I asked. Unfortunately, Marcus's insurance has a lifetime cap on organ transplants. They'll cover about $200,000, leaving you with an out-of-pocket expense of approximately $100,000. $100,000. It might as well have been $1 million. My total savings, including James's life insurance money and my modest retirement account, amounted to maybe $80,000. "I'll find the money," I said, "immediately, whatever it takes." That was the moment I sealed my fate. The moment I committed to destroying my financial security to save my son's life. At the time, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. What mother wouldn't bankrupt herself to save her child? Dr. Williams scheduled my test for the following week.
As we left his office, Marcus hugged me tighter than he had in years. "Thank you, Mama. Thank you, Mama," he whispered in my ear. "I don't deserve you." He was right about that, but not in the way I thought at the time. The test took 2 full days: blood draws, scans, psychological evaluations, meetings with social workers. Northwestern Memorial was thorough in their assessment of potential kidney donors. They wanted to make sure I understood the risks, that I was making an informed decision, and that I was physically and mentally capable of handling the surgery and recovery. "Mrs. Johnson," said Dr. Sarah Martinez, the transplant coordinator, "I have to ask, are you feeling any pressure from your family to do this? It's important that this decision is entirely yours." "No pressure at all," I told her honestly. "This is something I want to do."
And I meant it. At that point, I genuinely wanted to save my son's life, even if it cost me everything I had. The results came back a week later. I was a perfect match. Perfect blood type compatibility, perfect tissue markers, excellent general health for a 68-year-old woman. Dr. Williams called it remarkable how well suited I was to be Marcus's donor. "It's like you were meant to save his life," Jasmine said when we got the news. If only I had known how literally true that statement was, in the most twisted way possible. The financial preparation began immediately. I met with my bank manager, Harold Stevens, a kind man in his 60s who had helped me manage my modest finances for over a decade. "Ruby," he said, looking over the paperwork I'd brought him, "this is a lot of money. Are you sure about this?" "It's for my son's life, Harold. What choice do I have?" "I understand, but I want to make sure you understand the implications. You're talking about taking a second mortgage on your house, cashing out your retirement account early, which comes with substantial penalties, and liquidating almost all of your investments. Will it be enough?" Harold did some calculations on his computer. "If we do everything, the second mortgage, the early withdrawal from your 401k, liquidating your CDs and savings bonds, you'll have about $95,000. Still short of the $100,000 you need. I can sell some things, James's tools, some jewelry." "Ruby, after this, you'll essentially be starting over financially. At 68, with just your Social Security and a small pension, you'll be living very close to the poverty line." "My son will be alive," I said simply. Harold nodded, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "All right, let's get started on the paperwork." Over the next month, I systematically dismantled my financial security. The second mortgage was the hardest part. Signing papers that put my house at risk felt like signing away the last piece of James's legacy. But I did it because I thought I was saving Marcus's life. During this period, Jasmine was wonderfully supportive. She helped me organize the paperwork, drove me to bank appointments, and constantly reassured me that I was doing the right thing. "Ruby, Marcus is so lucky to have you as a mother," she would say. "Not every woman would sacrifice everything for her child."
She was right about that too, though again, not in the way I understood at the time. I started noticing small things during this period that should have set off alarm bells. Jasmine always seemed to have new clothes, new jewelry, new shoes. When I mentioned it, she said they were gifts from her clients at the beauty salon, or things she'd bought on sale months ago. Marcus's condition seemed to fluctuate wildly. Some days he could barely get out of bed. Other days he seemed almost normal. When I asked about this, they explained that kidney disease was unpredictable, that people could have good days and bad days. I also noticed that Marcus never seemed to have dialysis on the days I expected. The schedule seemed irregular, and when I asked about it, Jasmine said the dialysis center was very flexible with their scheduling. But I was so focused on saving my son's life that I pushed these concerns aside. I told myself I was being paranoid, that grief and worry were making me see problems where none existed. The surgery was scheduled for October 15th, exactly 8 weeks after my initial meeting with Dr. Williams. In the days leading up to the operation, I felt a strange mix of terror and peace. Terror about the surgery itself, but peace about what I was doing. I was going to save my son's life. Whatever happened to me afterward would be worth it. That's when the first major crack in their story appeared. It was October 8th, exactly 1 week before my scheduled surgery. I'd gone to visit Marcus and Jasmine, bringing them a lasagna I'd made because I wanted to make sure Marcus was eating well before the operation. When I arrived at their apartment, Marcus wasn't there. "Where is he?" I asked Jasmine. "Dialysis," she said automatically. "He had an emergency session. His potassium levels were too high." I nodded and put the lasagna in their refrigerator. But as I was leaving, I decided to drive past the dialysis center where Marcus supposedly received his treatments. Northwestern Memorial had given me a list of facilities in the area, and I knew Marcus was supposed to be going to Chicago Kidney Care on the south side. I parked across the street and waited. And waited. For 3 hours, I sat in my car, watching the entrance to the dialysis center. Marcus never came out. When I called Jasmine to ask how the session went, she said it had gone fine and that Marcus was resting at home. "Is he feeling up to visitors?" I asked. "Oh, you know how he is after dialysis. Completely wiped out. Maybe tomorrow would be better." I drove to their apartment. Marcus's car was in the parking lot. I knocked on the door.
"Who is it?" Marcus called from inside. "It's Mama." There was a long pause, then footsteps, then the door opened to reveal Marcus looking perfectly healthy, not like someone who had just spent 4 hours on dialysis. "Hey, Mama, what are you doing here?" "Jasmine said you just got back from dialysis. I wanted to check on you." "Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Just tired, you know." But he didn't look tired. He looked normal, alert, healthy. That night I couldn't sleep. For the first time since this all began, I allowed myself to seriously consider the possibility that something was wrong with the story I had been told. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to follow Marcus to his next dialysis appointment. According to the schedule Jasmine had given me, Marcus had dialysis every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 a.m. It was Wednesday, October 9th, and I was parked across the street from their apartment at 7:30 a.m., waiting to see where Marcus really went when he left for dialysis. At 7:45, Marcus and Jasmine emerged from their building. They got into Marcus's car, a late model Honda Civic that seemed awfully nice for someone who was supposedly struggling with medical bills, and drove off. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. They didn't go to Chicago Kidney Care. They didn't go to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. They didn't go to any medical facility at all. Instead, they drove to the far south side, to an industrial area I had never seen before. Warehouses, truck depots, and auto repair shops lined the streets. It was the kind of neighborhood you wouldn't want to break down alone at night. That evening, I called Jasmine. "How did Marcus's dialysis go today?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh, it was rough," she said immediately. "His blood pressure dropped during the session, and they had to stop early. He's been sleeping ever since." Another lie. Marcus had been at that warehouse for at least 6 hours. The next day, I made another decision that probably saved my life. I hired a private investigator. Walter Robinson came highly recommended from a friend at church whose son had gotten involved with drugs a few years earlier. Walter was a retired Chicago police detective in his early 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. His office was in a small building in Hyde Park, lined with file cabinets and framed citations from his years on the force. The walls were covered with photos of Walter receiving various awards and commendations. "Mrs. Johnson,"
he said, settling behind his desk with a cup of coffee. "Tell me what's going on." I explained everything: the kidney disease diagnosis, the dialysis treatments, the upcoming transplant surgery, and the $100,000 I was about to spend. Then I told him about following Marcus to the warehouse. Walter listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me carefully. "Mrs. Johnson, I have to ask, what's your gut feeling about all this?" "I think my son is lying to me," I said, the words feeling strange and terrible coming out of my mouth. "I think he's been lying to me for months." "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to follow him. I want to know where he really goes when he says he's going to dialysis. I want to know what's in that warehouse. And I want to know if my son is really dying." Walter quoted me a rate of $75 an hour plus expenses. For a full week of surveillance, he estimated it would cost about $3,000. Money I didn't really have after liquidating my savings for Marcus's surgery. But I had to know the truth. "One more thing, Mrs. Johnson," Walter said as I was preparing to leave. "If your son is lying about something this serious, there's usually a significant motivation. Money, drugs, legal problems, something big. Are you prepared for the possibility that what I find might be worse than medical fraud?" I wasn't prepared, but I said yes anyway.
Walter started his surveillance the next day, Thursday, October 10th. For the next week, he followed Marcus everywhere. The results delivered to me the following Thursday in a manila envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, shattered everything I thought I knew about my son. According to Walter's report, Marcus hadn't visited any medical facility in the past week. Instead, he went to that Southside warehouse every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he went to various locations around the city, always industrial areas, always meetings with men Walter described as possibly involved in illegal activities. But the most damning evidence was the photographs. Walter had managed to get pictures of Marcus at the warehouse, and they showed a man who was clearly not dying of kidney failure. Marcus was lifting heavy boxes, loading trucks, and supervising other workers. In one photo, he was carrying what appeared to be a 50-pound bag of something over his shoulder. In another, he was laughing and joking with other men during what looked like a lunch break. These were not the actions of a man whose kidneys were failing. "Mrs. Johnson," Walter said when he delivered the report, "I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. Your son appears to be running some kind of operation out of that warehouse. I wasn't able to get inside to see exactly what's going on, but based on the equipment I saw being moved in and out, it could be anything from stolen goods to drug manufacturing." "What about the dialysis? What about Dr. Williams?" I followed up on that too. There is no Dr. Williams in the nephrology department at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. In fact, Northwestern Memorial doesn't even perform kidney transplants at their main campus. Those procedures are done at their satellite facility in Evanston. The room started spinning. So, the doctor I met was an imposter. I ran the photos you gave me through some databases, and I think I know who he is. A man named David Chen, a veterinarian who lost his license 5 years ago for insurance fraud. A veterinarian, a fake doctor. My son's kidney disease was a complete fabrication. "Mrs. Johnson," Walter said gently, "I need to ask you something important. Have you signed any papers recently besides the medical consent forms, insurance policies, legal documents, anything like that?" "Just the surgical consent forms and some insurance paperwork that Jasmine said the hospital required."
"I'd like you to look at those papers very carefully. Sometimes in cases like this, people sign documents they think are medical forms, but they're actually other types of legal instruments." That night, I went through every piece of paper related to Marcus's treatment. Hidden among the legitimate-looking medical forms, I found 3 documents that made my blood run cold. A life insurance policy in my name for $500,000 with Marcus as the sole beneficiary. A power of attorney document giving Jasmine control over my finances in case of medical incapacitation. A will, apparently signed by me, though I had no memory of signing it, leaving my house and all remaining assets to Marcus. I called Walter immediately. "Mrs. Johnson, you need to come to my office right now, and I think we need to call the police." But I wasn't ready for the police yet. First, I wanted to confront Marcus and Jasmine. I wanted to look them in the eyes and hear them try to explain what they'd done. The confrontation happened the next day, Friday, October 11th, 4 days before my scheduled surgery. I went to their apartment with Walter's report in my purse and murder in my heart. Marcus answered the door looking surprised to see me. "Hey, Mama, what's up?" "We need to talk," I said, pushing past him into the apartment. All 3 of us. Jasmine emerged from the bedroom, and I could immediately see the wariness in her eyes. She knew something was wrong. "Marcus," I said, looking directly at my son, "I need you to tell me about your kidney disease." "What do you mean? You know about my kidney disease." "I know what you've told me about your kidney disease." "I want to hear it again." Marcus and Jasmine exchanged glances. "Mama, what's this about? You're acting strange." "I'm acting like someone who just found out her son has been lying to her for months." I pulled Walter's report from my purse and threw it on their coffee table. "I hired a private investigator, Marcus. I know you're not sick. I know you don't go to dialysis. I know Dr. Williams is a fake. I know everything." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at the photographs of himself at the warehouse, his face cycling through surprise, anger, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. "Mama," he said finally, "I can explain. Please, do." Marcus sat down heavily on the couch. "Okay, yes, I'm not sick, but I can explain why we did this." "We?" I looked at Jasmine, who was standing frozen by the bedroom door. "I got involved with some bad people, Marcus. Drug dealers. I owed them money. A lot of money. They were going to kill me if I didn't pay them back." "How much money?" $50,000. "So you decided to fake a kidney disease and steal $100,000 from me?" "Not steal, Mama. Borrow. We were going to pay you back once I got clear of these people." The lies just kept coming. "And what about this? I pulled out the life insurance policy. Were you planning to pay me back after I was dead?" Marcus looked genuinely confused. "What life insurance policy?" I handed him the document. As he read it, his face went pale. "Mama, I didn't sign this. I don't know anything about this." "Jasmine did." I turned to face my daughter-in-law, who had been notably silent during this exchange. "Didn't you, Jasmine?" For the first time since I'd known her, Jasmine looked genuinely rattled. "Ruby, you don't understand the situation we're in." "And then explain it to me." "The people Marcus owes money to, they're not just drug dealers. They're connected to some serious criminal organizations. They told us that if Marcus couldn't pay, they'd kill him and come after his family. That includes you." "So you decided to kill me first?" "No." Jasmine's voice was shrill now. "The life insurance was it was a backup plan in case something happened to you during the surgery. Kidney donation surgery has risks, Ruby. People can die. We just wanted to make sure that if the worst happened, Marcus would have the money to disappear, to get away from these people." "And the power of attorney? The will? Those were in case you decided not to go through with the surgery. We needed some way to access your assets to pay these people off." I looked at my son, who was sitting with his head in his hands. "Marcus, look at me." He raised his head, and I saw tears in his eyes. "Is any of this true? Are you really in danger from drug dealers?" "Yes, Mama. That part is true." Then why didn't you just come to me and ask for help? Why this elaborate lie about kidney disease? Because you never would have given us $50,000 for drug debts, but you'd give us $100,000 to save my life. The casual, matter-of-fact way he said it hit me like a slap. My own son knew exactly how to manipulate my love for him. So you were going to let me go through surgery. You were going to let me give you my kidney even though you don't need it. We weren't going to let you actually have the surgery, Jasmine said quickly. We were going to call it off at the last minute, make up some excuse. After I'd already spent $100,000. We were going to pay you back, Marcus insisted. Once we got clear of these people, we were going to get jobs, real jobs, and pay you back every penny. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where I'd grown up, where I'd raised this lying, manipulative stranger who shared my DNA. Who is Dr. Williams? I asked without turning around. A friend of Jasmine's from her old neighborhood. He used to be a vet, but he lost his license. Jasmine paid him $5,000 to pretend to be a kidney specialist. My $5,000? Ruby, we never meant for it to go this far. It got out of hand. I turned back to face them. When is the surgery supposed to happen? Monday, Marcus said quietly. And you were really going to let me go through with it? No, we were going to call Northwestern this weekend and tell them there had been a complication, that the surgery needed to be postponed. But you'd already have my money. We would have paid you back, Marcus repeated. But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. I walked back to the coffee table and gathered up Walter's report. I'm leaving now. I don't want to see either of you again. Mama, wait, Marcus called after me. You don't understand the danger we're in. These people will kill us if we don't pay them. I stopped at the door and turned back one last time. Marcus, I've been a nurse's aide for 30 years. I've seen people die from kidney failure. I've watched families destroy themselves trying to pay for treatment. I've held the hands of mothers who've lost children to diseases they couldn't afford to treat. And you used that knowledge against me. You used my love for you and my fear of losing you to steal my life savings. We're your family, Jasmine said desperately. No, I replied. Family doesn't do this to each other. I walked out of their apartment and never went back. But the story doesn't end there. Because that night, as I sat in my living room trying to process what I'd learned, I realized I still didn't know the whole truth. The warehouse operation, the mysterious meetings, the sophisticated nature of the fraud they'd perpetrated. It all seemed too complex for Marcus and Jasmine to have conceived and executed on their own. I called Walter. Walter, I confronted them. You were right about everything. But I think there's more to this story. What do you mean? The fake doctor, the forged documents, the warehouse operation. This seems too professional for a couple of drug addicts to pull off alone. I was thinking the same thing. Mrs. Johnson, would you be willing to work with law enforcement on this? I have contacts in the Chicago PD who specialize in this kind of fraud. What would that involve? They'd want you to wear a wire, try to get Marcus and Jasmine to admit to more details about their operation. If this is as big as I think it might be, your son and daughter-in-law could be part of a larger criminal organization. The thought of wearing a wire to record my own son felt surreal. But I'd come this far. What do I need to do?
Detective Sarah Morrison met with Walter and me the next morning. She was a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen everything the criminal justice system had to offer. Mrs. Johnson, she said, what you've described sounds like what we call long con elder fraud. It's become increasingly sophisticated in recent years, often involving multiple perpetrators and lasting for months or even years.
You think there are other people involved? Almost certainly. The fake doctor, the forged documents, the life insurance policies, those require connections and expertise that most individual criminals don't have. We've been tracking a network of con artists who specialize in exactly this kind of fraud. What happens to Marcus and Jasmine? If they're just small players in a larger operation, they might be willing to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. But, Mrs. Johnson, I have to warn you, if this is connected to organized crime, as their drug debt story suggests, there could be dangerous people involved. That afternoon, I called Jasmine and told her I'd reconsidered, that I wanted to discuss a way to help them with their problem. We arranged to meet at a restaurant in downtown Chicago, a public place where Detective Morrison could position surveillance equipment. The wire was smaller than I'd expected, just a tiny device taped to my chest under my blouse. Walter and Detective Morrison would be listening from a van parked across the street. Jasmine arrived at the restaurant looking nervous and exhausted. She'd aged years in the few days since our confrontation. "Ruby, thank God you called. I was so afraid you'd never speak to us again." "I've been thinking about what Marcus said about the dangerous people you owe money to," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe there's a way I can help." Jasmine's eyes lit up with hope. "Really? You'd still be willing to help us, Ruby?" "I don't want anything to happen to Marcus, even after what you've done. But I need to understand exactly what kind of situation you're in." "It's complicated, Ruby. The people we owe money to, they're not just street-level drug dealers. They're part of a bigger organization." "What kind of organization?" Jasmine glanced around the restaurant nervously. "They run all kinds of operations. Drugs, sure, but also identity theft, insurance fraud, human trafficking. Marcus got involved because they promised him big money for easy work." "What kind of work?"
At first, it was just moving packages. No questions asked, good pay. But then they found out Marcus had a mother with assets, and they came up with this idea. This idea? The fake kidney disease. They said it was foolproof. Elderly people will do anything to save their children, and medical fraud is hard to prosecute because the victims are often too embarrassed to come forward. My blood ran cold. Are you saying this wasn't Marcus's idea? God, no. Marcus would never have thought of something this elaborate. They have people who specialize in this, forgers, fake doctors, even people who work in real hospitals who help them identify potential victims. How many other families have they done this to? I don't know for sure, but from what I've heard, a lot. Ruby, they have this whole system worked out. They identify elderly people with assets and adult children with drug problems or financial difficulties. Then they approach the children and offer to help them solve their problems in exchange for cooperation in defrauding their parents. And if the children refuse, they don't really give you a choice. Once you owe them money, you do what they say or you disappear. I felt sick. Jasmine, who is the fake Dr. Williams? What's his real name? Davidson. But Ruby, he's just an employee. The people who run this operation, I've never met them. Marcus deals with a man named Tony, but even Tony answers to someone else. Where's this warehouse where Marcus works? That's where they store stolen medical equipment before they resell it. Marcus's job is to help organize the inventory and load trucks for shipments. Stolen medical equipment? Dialysis machines, surgical instruments, even things like wheelchairs and hospital beds. They steal it from hospitals and medical supply companies, then sell it to buyers overseas. The scope of this criminal operation was staggering. It wasn't just fraud, it was theft, money laundering, international smuggling. Jasmine, I want to help you and Marcus get out of this situation, but I need you to be completely honest with me. How much money do you really owe these people? $50,000, like Marcus said, but Ruby, the interest keeps growing. Every week we don't pay, they add more to the debt. And if I give you the $50,000, this all goes away? That's what they promised. I leaned across the cable and took Jasmine's hand. I'm going to help you, but in return, I need you to help me. What do you mean? I need you to help me make sure these people never do this to another family." Jasmine's face went pale. "Ruby, you don't understand what you're asking. If they find out I talked to anyone, they won't find out if we do this right." That evening, Detective Morrison debriefed me on what we'd learned. "Mrs. Johnson, your daughter-in-law just handed us the biggest lead we've had in 2 years of investigating this organization. If we can get her to cooperate formally, we might be able to take down the entire network." What would happen to Marcus and Jasmine if they cooperate? That depends on how much help they provide and how deeply involved they are. If they're truly victims who got coerced into the scheme, they might face minimal charges. If they were willing participants from the beginning, they're looking at serious federal time. What do you need me to do? We need to set up a controlled meeting with Marcus and this Tony person. If we can get Tony on tape admitting to the fraud scheme, we can work our way up the chain. The next phase of the operation was more complex than I had ever imagined. Detective Morrison worked with federal agents to set up surveillance at the warehouse. They needed to document the stolen medical equipment operation while simultaneously gathering evidence about the elder fraud scheme. Meanwhile, I had to continue playing the role of the concerned mother who was willing to pay her son's debts. It was emotionally exhausting, pretending to care about Marcus's well-being while knowing he'd been planning to defraud and possibly kill me. The breakthrough came a week later when federal agents raided the warehouse during a shift change. They arrested 15 people, including Marcus, and seized over $2 million worth of stolen medical equipment. But the biggest shock was yet to come. Among the items seized in the raid were filing cabinets full of documents detailing the elder fraud operation. My case wasn't unique. It was one of dozens of similar schemes targeting elderly parents across the Midwest. The organization had defrauded families out of an estimated $12 million over the past 3 years.
Even more disturbing was what they found in Marcus's personal files. Detailed psychological profiles of potential victims, including me. The file contained information about my marriage to James, my financial situation, my health history, and even my personality traits. They knew exactly which emotional buttons to push to manipulate me. "Mrs. Johnson," Detective Morrison told me during one of our briefings, "your son provided them with incredibly detailed information about you, bank account numbers, social security information, medical history, and even they needed to create those forged documents." How long had he been planning this? Based on the dates in the files, at least 18 months, possibly longer. 18 months. For a year and a half, my son had been systematically gathering information about me to help criminals steal my life savings. The trial began 6 months later. Marcus, faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a 40-year federal sentence, agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. His testimony helped convict 17 other members of the organization, including the mastermind, a man named Vincent Torino, who had been running similar operations in 5 different states. Jasmine also cooperated, and her testimony was particularly damaging because she had been present for many of the planning meetings. She received a 5-year sentence, reduced from the original 15-year recommendation because of her cooperation. Marcus received 12 years. The day of his sentencing was the hardest day of my life. Harder than James's funeral, harder than the day I learned about the fraud. I sat in the courtroom gallery and listened to my son apologize to the judge, to the other victims, and finally to me. "I know I can never make up for what I did to my mother," he said, his voice breaking. "She gave me everything. Her love, her support, her entire life savings. And I repaid her by trying to steal from her, and worse. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope that someday I can become the man she deserved to have as a son." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, looked directly at Marcus before imposing the sentence. Mr. Johnson, what you did wasn't just theft. You betrayed the most fundamental trust that exists between a parent and child. You used your mother's love as a weapon against her. 12 years in federal prison seems almost insufficient for that level of betrayal. As the bailiff let Marcus away in shackles, he looked back at me one last time. I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. But it was too late. Far too late.
The aftermath was almost as difficult as the fraud itself. The media attention was intense. Local news stations picked up the story of the elderly woman who'd almost been killed by her own son's kidney donation scam. I received dozens of interview requests, most of which I declined. The financial recovery was partial at best. The federal government seized assets from the criminal organization and established the Victim Compensation Fund, but I only recovered about $30,000 of the nearly $100,000 I'd lost. The second mortgage on my house remained, and I was forced to take a part-time job at a local grocery store to make ends meet. At 68, I found myself starting over, financially and emotionally. But I also discovered strengths I didn't know I had. The first person to reach out to me after the story became public was Margaret Washington, an 82-year-old woman from my neighborhood who'd read about my case in the Chicago Tribune. "Ruby," she said when she called, "I want you to know you're not alone. My grandson tried something similar 2 years ago. Not as elaborate as what your son did, but he forged my signature on a loan application and nearly cost me my house." "What did you do?" "I prosecuted him. Hardest thing I ever did, but it was the right thing. These children need to learn that love doesn't mean enabling their criminal behavior." Margaret became my lifeline during the difficult months following the trial. She introduced me to a support group for elderly crime victims that met weekly at a community center in Bronzeville. Listening to other people's stories helped me understand that family financial abuse was far more common than I realized. There was Dorothy, whose daughter had stolen her identity to open credit cards. There was Robert, whose son had convinced him to invest his retirement savings in a fake business. There was Linda, whose grandson had been slowly draining her bank account for 3 years before she noticed. "The hardest part isn't the money," Dorothy said during one of our meetings. "It's realizing that someone you loved and trusted saw you as a target instead of a person." That perfectly captured what I was feeling. The financial loss was devastating, but the emotional betrayal was worse. Working at the grocery store turned out to be unexpectedly therapeutic. The manager, a kind man named Carlos, who was about Marcus's age, treated me with respect and seemed genuinely interested in my well-being. My coworkers, mostly young people earning money for college, adopted me as a kind of workplace grandmother. "Miss Johnson," said Amanda, a 19-year-old cashier, "my grandmother always said you can't choose your family, but you can choose your friends. Maybe that's what you need to focus on now."
She was wiser than she knew. Slowly, very slowly, I began to rebuild my life. Not the life I'd had before, that was gone forever, but a new life built on different foundations. I started volunteering with the Chicago Police Department's Elder Abuse Prevention Program, sharing my story at community centers and senior housing facilities. It was difficult to relive the experience over and over, but I could see the impact it had on audiences. "Mrs. Johnson," said one elderly man after a presentation, "my daughter has been pressuring me to sign some papers that I don't understand. After hearing your story, I think I need to have them reviewed by a lawyer first." Those moments made all the pain worthwhile. I also became involved with federal legislation aimed at strengthening penalties for elder fraud. I testified before a congressional subcommittee about the need for better protections for elderly Americans. "Honorable members," I said during my testimony,
When criminals target elderly people, they're not just stealing money, they're stealing security, dignity, and trust. They're destroying families and leaving victims isolated and vulnerable. We need laws that reflect the true damage these crimes cause. The Elder Protection Act, which increased federal penalties for crimes targeting seniors, passed 6 months later. I like to think my testimony played a small role in that victory. 2 years after Marcus's sentencing, I received an unexpected visitor at work. A young woman in her 30s approached my checkout line with tears in her eyes. "Are you Ruby Johnson?" I asked. "Yes." "My name is Sandra Chin. David Chin was my father." David Chin, the fake Dr. Williams, who had played such a crucial role in Marcus's scheme. "I wanted to apologize for what my father did to you, and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "Your case finally gave prosecutors what they needed to put him in prison. For years, he'd been running medical scams, and we, his family, knew something was wrong, but couldn't prove it. When he got involved with your son's scheme, he finally got caught." "How is your father now?"
He's serving his sentence and getting the mental health treatment he should have gotten years ago. For the first time in decades, I have hope that when he gets out, he might actually be a different person. That conversation reminded me that even in the worst situations, there can be unexpected consequences that benefit others. 3 years after the trial, I made a decision that surprised even me. I wrote a letter to Marcus in prison. Not because I'd forgiven him, I wasn't sure I ever could, but because I needed to say some things I hadn't been able to say in court. "Marcus," I wrote, "I want you to know that I understand you were in a difficult situation with dangerous people. I understand that fear and desperation can make people do things they never thought they were capable of. But what I can't understand is how you looked me in the eyes every day for months, knowing what you were planning to do, and still called me mama. I need you to know that the woman who raised you, who loved you unconditionally for 42 years, is gone. She died the day I learned about your betrayal. The woman writing this letter is someone different, stronger maybe, but also harder. She's learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all, it's enablement. I hope you use your time in prison to become a better person, not for me, but for yourself and for any family you might have in the future. I hope you learn that real strength comes from honesty, not manipulation. And I hope you understand that actions have consequences that can't be undone, no matter how sorry you are afterward. I won't be visiting you. I won't be accepting your calls. This letter is goodbye. But it's also my way of saying that despite everything, I hope you find a way to live a life you can be proud of when you get out." I never sent the letter. Writing it was enough. Instead, I focused on building relationships with people who deserved my trust. Mrs. Washington became like a sister to me. Walter Robinson, the private investigator who'd helped expose Marcus's fraud, became a close friend. The other members of my support group became my chosen family. I also started dating again, something I never thought I'd do at my age. Robert Thompson was a 72-year-old retired teacher I met at a community center book club. He was gentle, honest, and patient with my trust issues. "Ruby," he said during one of our early conversations, "I can tell you've been hurt badly by someone you loved, and I want you to know that I'm not in any hurry. We can take this as slowly as you need." His kindness reminded me that there were still good people in the world. 4 years after Marcus's sentencing, I received a call from Detective Morrison.
Mrs. Johnson, I wanted to let you know that Vincent Torino was sentenced today. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Torino was the mastermind behind the Elder Fraud Organization. His conviction marked the end of a criminal enterprise that had victimized hundreds of families across multiple states. "How many families were affected in total?" I asked. "We identified 847 victims. The total amount stolen was over $47 million.
$47 million stolen from elderly people by their own family members or people posing as medical professionals. The scope of it was staggering. Mrs. Johnson, I want you to know that your willingness to cooperate was crucial to this investigation. If you hadn't been brave enough to wear that wire and gather evidence, we might never have been able to stop these people. It was gratifying to know that my pain had served a purpose, but it didn't erase what I'd lost. 5 years after the fraud, I finally felt ready to tell my story publicly. I worked with a journalist from the Chicago Tribune to write a detailed account of what had happened, hoping it might help other families avoid similar situations. The response was overwhelming. I received hundreds of letters from people who'd experienced family financial abuse, people who were currently suspicious of family members, and people who just wanted to express their support. One letter particularly moved me. Dear Mrs. Johnson, I'm a 45-year-old woman with a son who's struggling with drug addiction. After reading your story, I realized that I'd been enabling his behavior by constantly bailing him out financially. You've helped me understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Thank you for your courage in sharing your story. That letter reminded me why it was important to speak publicly about uncomfortable truths. 6 years after Marcus's sentencing, I received a call from the federal prison where he was incarcerated. He'd been stabbed during a fight in the prison yard and was in critical condition. For a moment, sitting in my living room with the phone in my hand, I felt the old maternal instincts kick in. My son was hurt and might die. Should I go to him? But then I remembered the life insurance policy, the forged documents, the months of lies. I remembered the woman who'd raised Marcus with unconditional love and how that love had been used as a weapon against her. I appreciate you calling, I told the prison official, but you're not his emergency contact anymore. You'll need to call someone else. I hung up the phone and went back to reading my book.
Marcus survived his injuries, but I didn't inquire about his condition or visit him in the hospital. That chapter of my life was closed. Today, 7 years after the fraud was exposed, I'm 75 years old and living a life I never could have imagined. I still work part-time at the grocery store because I enjoy the social interaction and the extra income. I volunteer regularly with elder abuse prevention programs. I have a boyfriend who treats me with respect and kindness. I have a circle of friends who value honesty over blood relations. Most importantly, I have peace. People often ask me if I miss Marcus, if I ever regret cutting him out of my life completely. The answer is complicated. I miss the Marcus I thought I knew, the little boy who used to help me in the garden, the teenager who called me every day from college, the young man who brought me flowers on Mother's Day. But I've come to understand that person may never have existed. The real Marcus was someone capable of planning his own mother's death for money. I don't regret protecting myself from him. I've learned that family isn't determined by blood or legal relationships. Family is determined by actions, by respect, by genuine love that doesn't come with conditions or hidden agendas. My real family now consists of people who chose to be in my life and whom I chose to trust with my heart. It's smaller than it used to be, but it's authentic in a way my old family never was. Last week, I received a letter from Marcus. It was the first communication I'd received from him since his sentencing. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. Mama, it began, I know I have no right to contact you after what I did. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed you to know that I've spent every day of the last 7 years thinking about what I did to you. I've been in therapy. I've been clean from drugs for 6 years, and I've tried to become the kind of person who could never do what I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to visit or write back. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I destroyed. It wasn't just money. It was trust. It was love. It was a relationship that could never be repaired.
I understand that you had to cut me out of your life to protect yourself, and I respect that decision. I hope you're happy. I hope you found peace. You deserved so much better than what I gave you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that." The letter was signed simply Marcus. I read it twice, then put it in a drawer with the letter I'd written to him years earlier but never sent.
I don't know if Marcus is truly changed. I don't know if his remorse is genuine or just another manipulation. And honestly, it doesn't matter. The trust that once existed between us is gone forever, and some things can't be repaired no matter how sorry someone is. But I hope, for his sake and for the sake of anyone else in his life, that he has learned to be a better person. As for me, I've learned the most important lesson of my life. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to set boundaries. It's never too late to choose dignity over loyalty to people who don't deserve it. I'm 75 years old, and I'm building the best life I've ever had. It's built on honesty, respect, and genuine love. The kind of love that doesn't ask you to sacrifice your well-being for someone else's convenience. If you're listening to this story and recognizing similarities to your own situation, I want you to remember you deserve to be treated with respect by the people in your life. You deserve to have your boundaries honored. You deserve to feel safe and valued. And if the people who claim to love you are asking you to compromise those things, they're not asking out of love. They're asking out of selfishness. Trust your instincts, ask questions, demand proof, and don't let anyone, not even family, make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. Your life, your health, your financial security, and your emotional well-being matter. You matter, and anyone who truly loves you will respect that. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone, somewhere, make the right choice when they need it most. Remember, love without respect isn't love at all. And family is what you make it, not what biology gives you.